During the war years, Henry also found time to challenge Tony, his youngest son, as any devoted father would for a boy then entering his teenage years. As you know, World War II was a time of drastic food rationing, and the Bryant family had duly converted much of its 1-acre backyard to a victory garden. Son Tony had been allocated a 400-square-foot segment of the lower garden, and his father encouraged him to develop it with vegetables of his choice. His father then gave him permission to peddle that produce to friends and neighbors on the south side of Waukesha, thus quietly aiming to kindle the boy's interest in the art of running a business. During the summer months, Tony harvested his products as they matured and bagged them for market. Taking them on his bicycle, he went door to door, selling them to neighbors. Here, Tony Bryant learned the values of hard work, self-sufficiency, and the basic tenets of the marketplace. Another opportunity Henry offered his son during the summer months was to work in Century Fence's shop for a few hours a day, 2 or 3 days a week, bending fence ties, bagging fittings, and other sundry tasks when he was not tending to his garden back home. The wage was 10 cents an hour. Tony would take his bike about 1 mile to the factory out on East Lincoln Avenue in Waukesha and learn all about the making of a chain-link fence. No doubt these early opportunities and challenges from his father prepared Tony Bryant for a career in business down the road. And as the war was ending, Henry Bryant, having done his part to serve America in 2 world wars, was entering his late 60s and thinking of selling the company. It would take a full 4 years after the end of hostilities in 1945 for domestic fence production to be once again widely available in the marketplace, and thus the company's prospects foundered. But Henry still had 2 kids in college. Soon, Tony Bryant would be following in his father's footsteps at Cornell, and the company just wasn't in a position to be sold for much in monetary value. So instead, Henry hired a young guy named Blaze Zilke, then in his late 20s, to further develop the company and sell the product. Henry's bold decision paid off, and business increased significantly. And in 1951, Bryant offered another young talent, Edwin Lyle, a similar position in the company as it was really starting to expand. The war was over, but Century Fence finally had a swing in its step. Well, by the 1950s, Century Fence was on a boom, becoming a more and more prosperous company. In 1954, the company expanded into a new market, establishing a branch of Century Fence in Minnesota. The company had won the contract to build the fencing at the new international airport in the Twin Cities, taking the local companies there by surprise. The project made enough money for Henry to think about opening a new division there, and soon a new office of Century Fence would be opened in St. Paul. And in that same year, Henry's youngest, Tony Bryant, was completing his military service and would be invited to join the growing company. 3 years later, he would join Century's board of directors. But the really big news of 1956 was that President Dwight D. Eisenhower passed through Congress the establishment of the nation's interstate highway program, opening up a wide array of opportunities for Century Fence in the areas of woven wire, right-of-way fencing, steel beam guardrails, overhead signing projects, and a host of other ventures. That same year, in response to its growing opportunities, Century Fence would acquire land in the village of Knapp in far western Wisconsin, further expanding its depot there for its new division 3 years later. Things were going so well that, in 1957, Henry Bryant, now 76, decided to promote Edwin Lyle to president of Century Fence, while he himself would stay on as its chairman. And at that same meeting of the board of directors, Century Fence adopted its first company profit-sharing plan, authored by Tony Bryant as his graduation thesis at Northwestern. Century Fence was certainly riding high.
Somewhere there's heaven, how high the moon. There is no moon above, and love is far away too. Till it comes true that you love me as I love you. Somewhere there's music, I know how far. Somewhere there's heaven, it's where you are. The darkest night would shine if you would come to me soon. I'll tell you will, I'll still my heart, how high the moon. Some